שלום לכם. נניח שיש מישהי שאתם מאוד מעריצים, זמרת או שחקנית מצוינת, ואז מתברר לכם שהיא גם מגדלת 3 ילדי אומנה בבית והקימה קונסרבטוריום בשכונת מצוקה. מדמיינים? אז ככה הרגשתי כשגיליתי שסופר המדע הפופולרי סיימון סינג הקים ארגון שמטרתו לקדם חשיבה מדעית באנגליה, ונאבק בהכללה של הומאופתיה במסגרת שירותי הבריאות ובסיקור מטעה של נושאי בריאות. זו זווית מאוד מעניינת של השפעה שיכולה להיות לנו כאנשי מדע על קובעי מדיניות, שכוללת עבודה דרך רגולטורים, התקשורת ומערכת המשפט. וכדי שנוכל לשמוע עוד, אעבור עכשיו לאנגלית. Shalom and welcome to Dr. Simon Singh, an author, journalist, and TV producer specializing in science and mathematics, who will help us learn how to stop complaining and start doing something about bad science reporting and bad science policy. Simon, thank you so much for joining us.
My pleasure.
Good Thinking, your charity, aims to encourage curiosity and promote rational thinking, but it spends a lot of energy on battling against irrationality in pseudoscience. For example, it combats homeopathy in the UK National Health Service. Why did you choose this battle, and what is your strategy?
So, I think a lot of our work is negative, combating pseudoscience and bad science and quackery. So we always try and champion the good as well. So that's why I kind of, use this strap line of championing curiosity and encouraging good thinking. And we often, we've offered prizes as well for people who do great podcasts, and we offer grants for people who are doing interesting science engagement ideas. So we have a kind of positive part of what we do. And we have a big maths education project as well in schools at the moment. So I like to think we do positive things, but we also do what we might call negative things, like challenging homeopathy in the NHS. When we pick a project like that, we're kind of saying we're a small charity, so we have limited. There's only so many things we can do. So what is nobody else doing? If somebody else is doing it, we'll let them do it. If nobody else is doing it, can we make a difference? Can we identify a clear problem? And can we then find ways of challenging it? And so with homeopathy in the NHS, the NHS has been around for a long time. And from the very beginning, homeopathy was part of the National Health Service, partly because the royal family has always been very, very fond of homeopathy. So it's kind of a leftover from a bygone day. And yet there are rules within the NHS. There are rules about only being able to offer treatments that are backed by evidence. And so we could start to apply the NHS's own rules in order to show that homeopathy should not be within the NHS. That for every £1 million that was spent on homeopathy, that's £1 million that wasn't being spent on nurses or on knee operations or something else. And we sometimes used, we sometimes took organizations or tried to take organizations to court to challenge their rules and their operations. And in a couple of cases, those organizations said, okay, it's okay, let's stop the case, we'll change our rules. So we think about how we can be effective and what we can change. And now I think homeopathy has almost been completely extinguished from the National Health Service. So, we've done a lot, but other people have also helped us and supported us and helped take this battle, because it's not about, again, I suppose it's not about the negativity of saying, stop wasting money on homeopathy. For me, it's a positive thing. It's about, let's spend that money on something really great, something that's really being tested and that we know can help patients.
But why not inform the public and let the public decide what they want to consume instead of maybe patronizing and limiting public's health choices?
So do you have a false advertising agency in Israel? Is that a good idea?
It sounds like a good idea.
But why not just let people advertise what they want and let the public choose what they want to buy?
So you don't feel that it puts you or puts science in a way in a patronizing position, saying we know what is good for you?
No, the National Health Service says so. The National Health Service says we must spend our money on effective treatments, on cost-effective treatments. We shouldn't buy this drug here, which is really expensive, when this other drug is half the price and just as good. So these are just common sense rules that the National Health Service should be following. And we just have made sure that they do follow those rules. But, you know, on the other hand, I still think it's, you know, you can try and educate the public, but it's really hard. It's really, you know, there are, I don't know, 70 million people in Britain. It's really hard. You know, I'm a physicist by training. I know you're a biologist by training. I know very little about vaccines. I know very little about how they work. I know very little about the side effects or the complications or the complexities. I'm a physicist, okay? I'm confused, I'm baffled. Now you can let me be ripped off by some crook. You can let me just fall for some fake advertising. You can let me trawl the web and just, you know, do myself harm, or you can protect me. So you can complain to the BBC when the BBC has a misleading broadcast. You can try and stop those things at the first place. You can complain to the advertising agency. So the Advertising Standards Agency, which is what it's called in the UK, bans those adverts. So I think we have a job to protect the public from false information. You know, it's really impossible for the public, and I include myself as a member of the public. It's very hard for us to understand whether this claim is true or that claim is true. When, you know, they both seem fine. They both seem to make sense.
What really is your approach to dealing with irresponsible science reporting? I imagine it's not to grumble and moan with your fellow physicists.
Yeah, so there are, again, so science reporting covers a whole range of journalists, from specialist science journalists, and I kind of think science specialist journalists are the friends of the public. Their job is to represent the science accurately. They're not promoters of science. It's not their job to be biased in favor of science. Their job is to report it accurately. And they take great pride in that. They provide a public service. The problem is often when science gets so important that the non-science journalist is covering it. And then the non-science journalist may be more interested in getting a great headline, getting as many readers as possible, getting as many clicks as possible, writing an article that's so sensationalist that the editor says, hey, that's fantastic, let's find another story like this. So at that point, I think it's our job to complain. And as you say, not just moan at the coffee table, but write a written complaint. Well, actually, maybe not quite that. So first of all, you can just ring up the journalist or email the journalist and say, look, you wrote this article. You know, I think you misunderstood it. And if it's an online article, you can get it corrected. So there was a mother who'd written a book because her daughter had, it was epilepsy. And the mother had said, instead of using conventional drugs, she'd switched to homeopathy. And so she'd written a whole book about how homeopathy should be used to treat children with epilepsy. And for the journalist, this was an incredible story of one woman's strength, a mother's caring for her child, a natural approach to a serious condition. This was an extraordinarily moving piece of journalism. And yet we contacted the journalist and we said, look, this is really dangerous. If other people follow this advice, it can really harm children. Don't just believe us. Go and visit the epilepsy charities, see what they say, see what they think about this. And the journalists realized they made a big mistake and they changed their article. So you can contact the journalist and be their friend and explain to them where they may have gone wrong. If they don't listen, you can contact the editor. If the editor doesn't listen, then you can make a formal complaint. If the formal complaint gets rejected, you can appeal to the Board of Trustees. So that's what happened to my first ever complaint. It was about a BBC program, and I love the BBC. I worked for the BBC for 5-6 years, so I love the BBC. But they made a program where they suggested that you could use acupuncture instead of a general anesthetic. And as I said, my initial complaint was rejected. My second complaint was rejected. My third complaint eventually went to the Board of Trustees and it was upheld. But if you're going to complain, you have to be tenacious. You have to really write your complaint in a way that makes something, that backs up your claims, and then follow through on it. Yeah, it's better to have one complaint that's upheld than 10 complaints that are just ignored.
So sometimes the journals just say something that is false, but sometimes the problem is that they bring someone who says something which is true, and someone for the balance that says the opposite. So in order to have a conflict. And when we tried in Israel to stop that, well, they said, this is free speech. There's someone think this way and someone else thinks that way. And we want to show all of them.
Yeah. So the same thing happened in Britain. It still happens in Britain. But there was an understanding when we had a vaccine controversy, which led to a decline in the number of people taking the MMR vaccine. And the BBC realized that, I think they realized that journalists had played a role in that by having this false balance, by always saying, this doctor says the vaccine's effective and the risks are small enough that the benefits are much bigger. And then they'd have somebody else from an anti-vaccine campaign saying the opposite. And clearly this left the public really confused. So the BBC commissioned a report from a guy called Steve Jones, Professor Steve Jones from University College London, who is a very brilliant science communicator as well. And he highlighted various problems in science journalism. And one of them was false balance. You and I can have different views on the impact of immigration. You and I can have different views on the impact of how we tackle climate change. Is it better to reduce energy, or is it better to invest in solar, or should we be having more nuclear? These are opinion questions, yeah, where there are different options. But it's much harder to have an opinion on whether climate change is real, because that's much more based on the evidence. What we do about it is a political question. It's a human question. There'll be different preferences. And I think it's hard for journalists who are not scientists to see the difference between this is simply a fact. This is not, there's no false balance about a fact. And obviously in science it's more complicated than that, that every fact in science is up for debate. But on a simpler level, I think journalists get confused between what's an established fact or what is the best understanding of the science that we have right now, and what is the policy that might flow from that? What is the political decision that might come from that?
So you feel that, in a way, it's your job to help them figure this out.
Well, I just tell them when they get it, when the media gets it wrong. I think we all have a responsibility. When I complained about that BBC program about the claim that acupuncture was as good as an anesthetic, a general anesthetic, nobody else complained. Mine was the only complaint. And I'm a physicist. I'm not an anaesthetist. I'm not a heart surgeon. This was about a major heart operation. There were I wasn't an acupuncturist. There should have been acupuncturists saying, look, I use acupuncture every day in my clinic, but I can't use it for that. So too many people just don't raise their voice. And if you're an expert in something and you know that something is wrong, then I think you have a responsibility to complain about it in a responsible way.
Dr. Simon Singh, thank you so much for sharing your thoughts and experience with us.
My pleasure. Thanks a lot.